We tend to picture the widow as a woman who simply endures, someone waiting out her remaining years in a too-quiet house. But sit with how that generation of women actually lived, the ones who married young and then, one ordinary morning, found themselves alone after 40 years. And something more interesting appears. They were not mainly worried about being safe. They understood that the danger of living alone was never really the fall on the floor. It was the slow forgetting that you were still part of the world. Here are 6 things they seem to understand about that. 1. The silence was the first thing to survive. The first morning is not the hardest one. The first morning the house is still full of people. A sister in the kitchen, a neighbor at the door, a casserole nobody will eat. The hardest morning comes weeks later, when the visitors have gone home to their own lives, and you wake, and the house has changed shape around you. That generation understood something about silence that we've half forgotten. For a woman who had shared a home for 40 years, silence was not peace. It was an absence with edges. No one breathing in the next room. No one to ask how she'd slept. No one to notice she'd gone quiet. And so the wise ones did not wait for the silence to lift on its own. They learned to put a sound back into the morning. A radio switched on before the kettle. A window open to the street. A standing arrangement to telephone a friend at 8 every day, whether there was news or not. They knew a house could be safe and still swallow you whole, so they made the morning speak. 2. They let themselves be seen. There is a particular pride in a woman who has run a household for half a century. She has always been the one who managed, who remembered, who held things together for everyone else. To be the one who now needs looking after. That felt to many of them like a small defeat. But the ones who lived well made a quiet peace with being seen, not watched, not pitied, seen. They found the small arrangements that let another person know they were all right without asking them to explain themselves. A curtain drawn open by a certain hour. A porch light off by morning. A friend 2 doors down who knew what a normal day looked like and would notice a day that wasn't. It cost them something to accept it. Every one of them had to set down a little of that hard-won independence. But they came to understand a thing worth caring. To let yourself be seen by someone who cares for you is not weakness. It is one of the last best forms of trust. 3. They spent something on joy. When a woman found herself alone with whatever savings remained, the natural instinct was to close her hand around it. Every dollar became a dollar against some future disaster, against the roof, the doctor, the thing that hadn't happened yet. And slowly, without deciding to, she would stop living her life and begin only maintaining it. The wise ones caught themselves. They understood that a life spent entirely bracing for the worst is a kind of poverty all its own. So they kept something back for joy. Not much. The good coffee instead of the cheap tin. Fresh flowers on a Friday for no occasion. A soft blanket in a color that made them smile every time they passed it. They were not being frivolous. They were reminding themselves in the plainest way they knew that they were still a person who deserved beautiful things, not only a set of expenses waiting to happen. 4. They made peace with asking early. That generation was raised not to be a bother, to manage, to wait until a thing was truly bad before troubling anyone about it. And that instinct which had served them all their lives became the very thing that cornered them. because a woman who waits until the crisis to ask for help has already lost her choices. The strange noise in the pipes becomes the flood. The dizziness she blamed on grief becomes the fall. The small worry she didn't want to bother her daughter with becomes the phone call at midnight. The ones who kept their independence longest learned the opposite habit. They asked early. They asked while it was still a small thing. A bulb changed before anyone climbed a chair. A doctor called it the first odd feeling, not the third. They understood that asking for help before the crisis is not the surrender of independence. It is how you keep it. 5. They kept a ritual that was only theirs. In a long marriage, the days have a shape you don't have to think about. Someone else's schedule presses against yours. Meals happen at a certain hour because two people are hungry. The day has banks, like a river. When the other person is gone, the banks go with them. The hours run together. Morning and afternoon and evening lose their edges, and a woman can find herself at 4 p.m, still in the chair she sat down in at 9, unsure where the day went. So the wise ones built themselves one ritual and guarded it like something precious. Coffee on the porch at 7, in the same cup, whatever the weather. A walk to the end of the road and back before the news. A letter written every Sunday to a grandchild, to an old friend, sometimes to the husband who was gone. Letters that were never meant to be sent. It looked like a small thing. It was not a small thing. It was a stake driven into the ground of the day so the current couldn't carry her off. A way of saying every morning, I am still here. I am still keeping my own life. 6. They stayed reachable. This is the one that mattered most, and the one that was hardest, because it asked the most of a proud woman. It would have been easy, so easy, to let the circle close. The friends were fewer now. Some had gone before the husbands did. The children were far and busy and had lives that filled every hour. It was easy to decide that she would not be the one always reaching out, that if they wanted her, they knew where she was. And a woman who made that decision could go a very long time without anyone truly noticing. She had gone quiet. The ones who lived well refused the closing circle. They stayed reachable. They picked up the telephone first, even when pride said to wait. They said yes to the invitation they were tired for. They let the grandchildren call it inconvenient hours. They understood that connection at that stage of life does not arrive on its own doorstep. It has to be reached for again and again with a hand that is not always sure it will be taken. That was the real work of living alone, not the locks and the handrails, the staying reachable, the refusing quietly and daily to disappear. There's something that generation of women understood, taken all together, that they rarely said aloud. The danger of outliving the person you built your life around was never mainly the danger of the empty house, or the icy step, or the long afternoon. It was the danger of slowly agreeing to become invisible, of deciding, without ever quite deciding, that your part in the world was finished, and the ones who lived, really lived, not merely got by, were the ones who kept insisting otherwise. With a moved curtain and a Sunday letter, and a telephone picked up first. With a good cup of coffee they had decided they still deserved. They were not braver than anyone else. They were simply not willing to let the silence have the last word. And if you had a woman like that in your life, a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, a neighbor who kept her own life going long after the world assumed she'd stopped, then you already know. They were teaching all of us how it's done. That was today's reflection. If you watched this and thought of someone, a person in your life who kept going quietly, long after they lost the one who organized their days, call them this week. Tell them you were thinking of them. That's the thing this reflection is really about. And if you'd like to bring more genuine human connection into an older loved one's week, Grand Companion can help. We match older adults with real people for regular, friendly conversations. While we love sharing stories here, our actual service is entirely powered by real human relationships. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, or leave a comment below. It really helps us share these stories with more people. Until next time.